my stepdad tried to kick me out of my own house. I, 25F, inherited my childhood home from my grandfather when I was 22. The thing is, only my mom and I knew about this inheritance, not even my stepdad Mark, 43M, knew. What happened next feels like something straight out of a revenge movie, but I swear every word is true. My grandfather wasn't just successful in real estate, he was a legend in our city. He started with nothing in the 1970s and built an empire through smart investments and genuine connections with people. He bought this house in 1985, and it's where my mom grew up and where I spent my entire childhood. When my biological dad abandoned us when I was 5, Grandpa stepped up. He was more of a father to me than anyone else. Every Sunday, he'd take me to his office and teach me about real estate, investments, and most importantly, how to stand up for myself in a world that often tries to push you down. Mark entered the picture when I was 15. He and Mom met at a parent-teacher conference. He was my brother's math teacher, if you can believe it. At first, he seemed perfect, attentive, caring, good with kids. But after they married a year later, the mask started slipping. It was never anything dramatic enough to cause a scene. Just little things, commenting on how long I spent in the shower because of the water bill, monitoring the thermostat like a hawk, making snide remarks about how I should be more grateful for living under his roof. Classic control freak behavior, but always with plausible deniability. When Grandpa got sick 3 years ago, he called me to his hospital room. I'll never forget that conversation. "Sarah," he said, his voice weak but his eyes sharp as ever, "I've watched that man try to diminish you for years. But you're stronger than he knows. The house is yours, has been since I bought it. I just kept it quiet until the right time." He passed away 2 days later. The lawyer contacted me shortly after with all the paperwork. Mom was thrilled when I told her. She'd always felt guilty about how Mark treated me but was caught in that complicated space between wife and mother. We decided to keep it quiet. Mom suggested it initially. Mark's pride would never recover if he knew he'd been playing Lord of the Manor in his stepdaughter's house. She wasn't wrong. For 3 years, we maintained the charade. They paid their mortgage, which went straight into my investment account. "Thanks for the lessons, Grandpa," and I played the role of the adult daughter who hadn't quite launched yet. I have a good job in tech that I can do remotely, so it made sense to stay and save money. Plus, I couldn't bear the thought of selling Grandpa's house. Everything changed last Tuesday. Mom called me at work, her voice bubbling with excitement. She was pregnant. At 41, it was unexpected but not unwelcome. I was genuinely happy for her. She's an amazing mom, and having a little sibling could be fun. But Mark? Oh, Mark saw this as his moment to finally assert total control over his domain. That evening, he orchestrated what he probably thought would be his crowning achievement as head of the household. He even dressed up for it, wearing that awful blue blazer he saves for parent-teacher conferences. The family meeting started at 7 p.m. sharp. Mark had arranged the living room like some corporate boardroom, with him and Mom on the couch, his arm draped possessively over her shoulders, and me in the armchair across from them. "Sarah," he began, using his teacher voice, "you know, the one that makes you feel like you're in detention. Your mother and I have been discussing the future of this household." I noticed Mom fidgeting with her wedding ring, her tell when she's uncomfortable. "With the baby coming, we need to make some practical decisions. You're 25 now, established in your career, and it's time you found your own place. We'll need your room for the nursery." He paused here, clearly expecting tears or protests. I just nodded, which seemed to throw him off slightly. "Now, I know this might seem sudden," he continued, his confidence rebuilding, "but it's really for the best. You need to start your own life, and we need to focus on our growing family." The way he emphasized our family, like I was some distant cousin overstaying my welcome, made my blood boil. But Grandpa always said the best revenge is served with a smile, so I kept my cool. "How long are you giving me?" I asked, watching his face carefully. He smiled that smug smile that never quite reached his eyes. "We're prepared to be generous. 2 months should be sufficient to find an apartment. I can help you look if you'd like." The condescension in his voice could have filled an Olympic swimming pool. That's when Mom spoke up, her voice quiet but steady. "Maybe we should discuss this more, Mark. There's no rush." "Honey," he cut her off, squeezing her shoulder in that way he does when he wants her to stop talking. Sarah needs to learn to stand on her own 2 feet. We're doing her a favor, really. That was it. That was the moment I decided the charade had gone on long enough. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and said, "Give me a moment. I need to get something from my room." Mark probably thought I was going to get tissues. Instead, I retrieved the folder I'd prepared years ago, the one Grandpa's lawyer helped me put together. Inside was everything: the deed, the will, bank statements showing their mortgage payments going into my account, and a letter from Grandpa explaining his decision. When I returned, I didn't sit back down. Instead, I stood by the fireplace, the one Mark had tried to fix last winter and nearly burned the house down. "Before you continue planning my eviction," I said, keeping my voice steady, "you might want to review these documents." I placed the folder on the coffee table, making sure it was oriented so Mark would see the deed first when he opened it. The next few minutes were a study in human emotion. I wish I'd recorded it for posterity. Mark went through the 5 stages of grief in about 30 seconds. Denial: "This is some kind of joke." Anger: "You've been lying to me for 3 years?" Bargaining: "We can discuss this reasonably." Depression: "I need a drink." Acceptance: "Well, we're still working on that one." He stormed out of the house, taking his precious blazer and what remained of his dignity with him. The door slam was so dramatic our neighbor Mrs. Peterson called to ask if everything was okay. Mom burst into tears, but they weren't entirely sad tears. "He needed this," she whispered, hugging me. We all did. The next few days were interesting, to say the least. Mark came back home at 3 a.m., smelling like the cheap scotch they serve at O'Malley's down the street. He tried to pick a fight, but I shut that down quick. "In case you missed it in your earlier review, I own this house. If you want to stay here, especially with a baby on the way, we need to establish some ground rules. First rule: no drunk tantrums at 3 a.m. He deflated like a dollar store balloon. The next morning, I called a family meeting of my own. Karma's fun like that. I laid out the new terms. 1. They can stay, of course. I'm not about to kick out my pregnant mom too. The mortgage payments will now officially be rent, with a proper lease. 3. Any house modifications need my approval. 4. Most importantly, no more power plays or passive-aggressive comments. Mark sat through the whole thing looking like he'd swallowed a lemon, but he nodded along. Mom kept squeezing his hand, probably to keep him from saying something he'd regret. Here's the real kicker: remember that nursery they wanted? I'd actually been planning to convert my old room anyway. I'd even started researching baby-safe paint colors and contacted a contractor about adding a window seat. But now? Now it was my choice to offer, not their demand to make. I presented my nursery plans at dinner last night. Mom cried, "Happy tears this time," and Mark. Well, Mark looked like he was trying to solve a particularly difficult math problem. You were planning this all along?" he asked, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. "Of course," I replied. "It's my house, my family, and my future sibling. I want them to have the best room possible." I swear I saw something shift in his eyes at that moment. Like maybe, just maybe, he was finally seeing me as an adult instead of the annoying teenage stepdaughter he'd been stuck with. It's been 2 weeks since the revelation, as Mom now calls it. Things are different. Not perfect, but different. Mark has started asking permission before doing anything to the house, almost to a comical degree. Yesterday he literally asked if it was okay to change a light bulb. Baby steps, I guess. Mom's morning sickness has kicked in full force, so I've been working from home more to help out. It's given Mark and me some awkward but necessary time to redefine our relationship. This morning, he knocked on my office door, formerly known as Grandpa's study, with 2 cups of coffee. "Can we talk?" he asked, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. We had a long conversation about the past 3 years, his behavior, and the future. He admitted that his need for control comes from his own father's absence. Apparently, he left when Mark was young, and Mark spent his whole life trying to prove he could be a better man than his dad. "I became exactly what I hated," he said, staring into his coffee. "A controlling jerk who made his family walk on eggshells." I won't say we hugged it out or anything that dramatic, but we did reach an understanding. He started therapy, his choice, surprisingly, and we're working on building a real relationship instead of the power struggle we've had for the past decade. We've actually started working on the nursery together. Turns out, when he's not trying to be the alpha male, Mark has some decent ideas about design. He suggested a space theme, which perfectly complements the constellation map Grandpa gave me years ago. Mom sits in the rocking chair, the same one Grandpa used to rock me in, and watches us work, offering commentary and cracking up at our attempts to agree on paint colors. "You two are more alike than you know," she said yesterday. "Both stubborn as mules, but with hearts of gold." I'm not sure about the gold part, but she might be right about the stubborn bit. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if Grandpa knew exactly how this would play out. He always said timing was everything, in real estate and in life. By making me wait to reveal the truth, he gave me time to grow into my own strength and gave Mark enough rope too. Well, you know the saying. Edit 1, holy cow, this blew up. RIP my inbox. Thank you for all the awards and support. I'm trying to respond to comments, but there are so many. Edit 2, to address the top questions. 1. Yes, everything was done legally. Grandpa's lawyer made sure of that. 2. No, I'm not planning to sell the house or evict them. 3. Yes, I've kept detailed records of all mortgage/rent payments. 4. The baby is due in January, it's a girl. 5. Mark is still in therapy and making progress. Edit 3, for those asking about Mom, she's doing great. Morning sickness is finally easing up, and she started planning the baby shower. And yes, she knew about the inheritance all along and supported keeping it quiet. Final update, 3 months later. Hey Reddit. A lot of you have been messaging me asking for an update, so here it is. Remember how I mentioned Mark helping me install a security system? Well, there's a whole story behind that. We had a break-in attempt last month, everyone's fine, and it was actually Mark who scared the would-be burglar away. He heard something at 2 a.m. and went to check it out while I called the police. After that, he approached me with a whole presentation, PowerPoint and everything, once a teacher, always a teacher, about upgrading our home security. Notice I said that's progress, people. The best part was when he started his pitch with, obviously, this is your decision since it's your house, but I'd like to present some options for your consideration. I almost fell out of my chair. Mark's been going to therapy consistently for 3 months now, and the change is remarkable. His therapist suggested family sessions, and we've done a few together. During our last session, he opened up about something that broke my heart a little. Apparently, the day after the revelation, he drove to his childhood home, the one his dad left when he was 8. He sat in his car for hours, realizing he'd turned into the controlling figure he'd always resented. That's when he made the decision to change. The nursery is done, and it's better than anything I could have imagined. We went with a space theme but added some personal touches. The constellation map from Grandpa is now the centerpiece of the room, and Mark, who apparently is an amateur woodworker, who knew, built a beautiful bookshelf in the shape of a rocket ship. Here's the moment that got me. While we were painting the ceiling, midnight blue with glow-in-the-dark stars, Mark turned to me and said, "You know, I spent so many years trying to be the authority figure in this house that I missed the chance to be something more important, family." We hosted the baby shower last weekend, and it was here that I saw the biggest change in our family dynamic. Mark insisted on handling all the arrangements, with my approval for anything house-related, of course. He turned the backyard into a journey through space theme to match the nursery. But the real surprise? He made a speech. Not just any speech, but one that had everyone in tears. 3 months ago, I thought I knew what it meant to be a father and head of a household. I thought it meant control, authority, and having the final say. I was wrong. Standing here today, in this house that my stepdaughter so graciously allows us to call home, I'm learning that being a father means supporting, nurturing, and sometimes it means admitting you were wrong and learning from those you thought you were supposed to teach. I wasn't crying. It was allergies. In December. Last week, while cleaning out some old boxes in the attic, yes, Mark asked permission first, we found a letter from Grandpa that he'd written just before he passed. It was addressed to both Mark and me, with instructions to open it when the truth comes out. The letter was Wow. Grandpa wrote that he'd watched our family dynamic for years and knew that someday things would come to a head. He explained that the house wasn't just a piece of property, it was a test and a lesson for both of us. For me, it was about learning to stand my ground and claim my place in the world. For Mark, it was about learning that real respect can't be demanded, it has to be earned. The last line of the letter read, "A house is built of bricks and beams. A home is built of love and dreams. Sometimes it takes a little shaking up to turn one into the other." Damn it, Grandpa. Still teaching us lessons from beyond. We've settled into a new normal. Mark and I have weekly house meetings where we discuss any needed repairs or changes. He's actually become quite handy, under my supervision, of course, and we're planning to renovate the kitchen together next spring. Mom's pregnancy is going great. Little Sophie, yes, we know it's a girl now, is due in 6 weeks. She keeps joking that the baby orchestrated this whole thing just to get us all to grow up and get along. The unexpected friendship. The biggest surprise? Mark and I actually enjoy spending time together now. We've started a Sunday tradition of watching home renovation shows and critiquing their design choices. He's still a bit of a control freak about some things, don't get him started on the proper way to load a dishwasher, but now it's more endearing than annoying. Last Sunday, he turned to me during a particularly bad episode of a renovation show and said, "You know, your grandfather would have hated that crown molding." He was right, and somehow him knowing that about Grandpa meant more than I can explain. So here we are, 3 months after what could have been the end of our family, and instead it's become a new beginning. The house feels different now, warmer somehow, like it's finally become what Grandpa always meant it to be, a home for all of us. Mark still asked permission before making any changes to the house, but now it's with respect rather than resentment. Mom is glowing with happiness, both from the baby and from seeing her family finally come together. And me? I'm learning that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's growth. If there's anything I've learned from all this, it's that family, real family, isn't about who owns what or who has the power. It's about choosing to love and respect each other, even when, especially when, it's hard. Yesterday, Mark handed me a set of keys. He'd made copies of the new security system keys and put them on a keychain with a little silver house charm. The tag attached read, "To the real head of the household, thank you for teaching me what that really means." I'm not crying, you're crying. Thank you all for your kindness and support. This will be my last update.